some Hollywood stories never actually end. They just go quiet for a while, waiting for someone to finally say the thing everyone already suspected. That's exactly what happened with Michelle Pfeiffer and John Malkovich. For nearly 4 decades, people in and around the film industry have whispered about what really went on between them during the making of a film about seduction and betrayal. And now, after almost 40 years of saying absolutely nothing, one of them has finally opened his mouth. What he said didn't sound like a denial. It didn't sound like a joke either. It sounded like a confession dressed up as a reflection, and once you understand what he actually meant, the whole story hits differently. Let's go back to where this all started. The year is 1988. A film called Dangerous Liaisons arrives in theaters, based on a French novel that had already been scandalizing readers for 2 centuries before Hollywood ever touched it. The story is built entirely around manipulation and seduction, a game of conquest between 2 aristocrats who treat love as a weapon. Directed by Stephen Frears, the film stars Glenn Close, John Malkovich, and Michelle Pfeiffer, and it becomes an instant sensation, eventually earning 7 Academy Award nominations. Pfeiffer plays a devoted, virtuous married woman. Malkovich plays the man sent to destroy her resolve, seduce her, and ruin her purely for sport. Night after night, week after week, the 2 of them had to perform devastation, longing, guilt, and surrender in front of a camera crew. And if you've ever wondered whether actors can really keep that kind of intensity locked inside the frame once the director yells "cut this," story might change your mind, because somewhere between the rehearsals and the real takes, something else was apparently happening. Something that had nothing to do with the script. Now here's the part that makes this so uncomfortable. Both of these actors were married at the time, and not in some casual, forgettable way. Pfeiffer had married television writer and producer Peter Horton back in 1981. On the surface, it looked like one of the more stable, low-drama marriages in Hollywood. No scandals. No tabloid chaos. Just 2 working professionals quietly building a life. Malkovich, meanwhile, was married to actress Glenn Headley, someone he'd met through the legendary Steppenwolf Theater Company in Chicago, the same ensemble that produced actors like Gary Sinise and Joan Allen. His relationship with Headley wasn't just romantic. It was creative. It was built inside rehearsal rooms and late-night runs of plays nobody else believed in yet. That's not the kind of bond people walk away from easily. So you have 2 actors, both genuinely committed, both with something real to lose, and somehow, according to everyone who has ever whispered about this film, they lost it anyway. So how did the public even find out something was going on if neither of them said a word? Simple. Film sets are not vaults. Crew members talk. Publicists talk. Journalists covering the production pick up on things. And when the movie you're filming is literally about the danger of giving into forbidden desire, the irony practically writes the headline for you. Rumors started circulating almost immediately after release, whispers that Pfeiffer and Malkovich had grown far closer than 2 co-stars typically do, and that the line between their character's story and their real one had blurred. Neither of them confirmed it. Neither of them denied it with any real force. They just went silent. And in an industry where silence usually means something, that silence spoke volumes. Then came the timing that made everyone raise an eyebrow. Peter Horton and Michelle Pfeiffer separated the same year the film was released. Glenn Headley and John Malkovich split apart around the exact same window. 2 marriages. 1 film set. Both collapsing almost simultaneously. You don't need to be a tabloid editor to connect those dots. Headley went on to build a respected career of her own, memorable for roles like the one in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, before passing away in 2017. Horton continued working steadily in television, but the story of what allegedly happened on that set never actually disappeared. It just sat there unresolved for over 3 decades, until very recently. Because here's where things actually get interesting. Not long ago, John Malkovich sat down for a podcast interview and, for the first time in his career, addressed the affair rumors directly. And the way he chose to phrase it says almost more than the admission itself. He opened by acknowledging that this isn't something he typically discusses. That alone tells you something. Silence, for Malkovich, has always been the strategy. But then he kept going. He described Pfeiffer as someone he valued deeply as a colleague, someone who was fun, moving, and remarkably fair with him. And then he added something that most people missed the weight of. He admitted that he, on the other hand, was not fair to her. That's not a denial. That's an admission wrapped in restraint. He went further still, saying that once a working relationship crosses from collegial into something more, even something built on real friendship, you don't just risk the romance. You lose the colleague entirely. And in his own words, a truly great colleague, he's learned over the course of his life, is rarer than almost anything else in this business. Read that carefully, because it's not a throwaway line. He isn't mourning a broken romance. He's mourning a professional partnership that could never be repaired once it turned into something personal. That is an incredibly specific kind of regret, and it tells you a lot about how a man like Malkovich actually processes what happened decades ago. He even drew a comparison to a different long-running collaborator, another actress he's worked with for over 3 decades, explaining that their partnership survived because, in his words, there was a line they never crossed. The implication is unmistakable. With Pfeiffer, that line didn't hold. So, where does that leave Michelle Pfeiffer in all of this? Silent. Completely and consistently silent, while Malkovich has now offered his carefully measured version of the truth. Pfeiffer has never once addressed the affair publicly, not to confirm it, not to deny it, not even to acknowledge that people are still talking about it. And knowing what we know about her as a public figure, that's not because she's avoiding hard conversations out of fear. Pfeiffer has always been one of the more private, deliberate actresses of her generation. She gives interviews sparingly and rarely lets the cameras past a certain point. Her silence here isn't an accident. It's a boundary she has chosen to maintain for over 30 years, and she has maintained it without a single crack. It's worth being honest here. Pfeiffer has not admitted anything. What changed recently is entirely on Malkovich's side. She's simply continued doing what she's always done, letting the story exist without her participation in it. And in a strange way, that absence has become its own kind of statement. So, what happened to these two after everything fell apart? Pfeiffer rebuilt her life with a kind of quiet determination that has defined her ever since. In 1993, she married television and film producer David E. Kelly, and the two have remained together for more than 30 years now, one of the more genuinely stable partnerships in the industry. She adopted her daughter, Claudia Rose, that same year, and later had a son, John Henry, with Kelly. Professionally, the years right after Dangerous Liaisons became some of the best of her career. The fabulous Baker Boys gave her an Academy Award nomination and one of cinema's most iconic images draped across a piano in a red dress. Then came Batman Returns, where her performance as Catwoman became legendary in its own right. She's continued working steadily ever since, including recent appearances in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Malkovich, for his part, eventually settled into a long-term relationship with Nicoletta Perrin, with whom he has 2 children, building a life largely based in Europe, away from the machinery of Hollywood. His career took its own unpredictable path, from earlier Oscar-nominated performances to the strange, self-aware brilliance of being John Malkovich, a film literally built around the mystery of who he actually is. He's remained one of the most unpredictable, respected actors of his generation. 2 people, 2 rebuilt lives, 2 very different ways of dealing with the same complicated chapter. So, why are people still talking about this all these years later? Because this story was never really about a simple affair. It's about what happens when 2 people are asked, professionally, to be completely vulnerable with each other, night after night, for months at a time. Acting demands a strange kind of intimacy that most jobs never require, pretending to love, grieve, and desire someone convincingly enough that an audience believes it. It shouldn't really surprise anyone that sometimes those emotions don't stay contained inside the story. It's also about what silence actually costs over time. Pfeiffer chose total silence and has held it for more than 30 years without a single slip. Malkovich chose something different: occasional, careful acknowledgement, and his recent comments are the closest thing to a crack that's ever appeared in that wall. And what's telling is what he chose to mourn, not the romance. The colleague. That tells you everything about how he spent decades making peace with what happened. In the end, this is a story about choices made in complicated, passionate moments and how those choices keep rippling outward. Decades later, still shaping how we see two of Hollywood's